The cargo ship drifted toward the docking port with a gentle hiss of thrusters. Inside, Daniel Reed checked the navigation display one more time before switching to manual control. He had made this trip to the crossroads station dozens of times, but today felt different. Today he had a passenger. Rascal sat in the co-pilot chair, his small black and white body looking almost comical against the oversized seat designed for various alien species. The honey badger made a low grunting sound and scratched at the armrest with his long claws, leaving fresh marks in the metal. "Yeah, I know, buddy. You hate space travel." Daniel reached over and scratched behind Rascal's ears. The animal leaned into the touch but kept his dark eyes fixed on the viewport. 3 months ago, Daniel had found Rascal in a shipping container on Mars. Some idiot had been running an illegal exotic animal trade, cramming creatures from Earth into tiny cages for wealthy collectors across the colonies. Most of the animals had died during transport. Rascal had survived by sheer stubbornness, living in his own waste and eating whatever scraps fell through the bars. The authorities had wanted to put him down. Too dangerous, they said, too aggressive to rehabilitate. But Daniel had looked into those fierce little eyes and seen something familiar. Survival. Pure, unfiltered determination to keep living no matter what the universe threw at you. So he had signed the papers, paid the fees, and taken Rascal home. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk. Daniel stood and grabbed his datapad while Rascal hopped down from the chair and waddled toward the airlock. The honey badger moved with a rolling gait that made him look slow and harmless. Daniel knew better. "Remember the rules," Daniel said as he attached the reinforced leash to Rascal's collar. "No biting unless something tries to hurt us first." Rascal made a huffing sound that could have meant anything. The airlock opened onto the main concourse of the crossroads. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds moved through the massive space, conducting business, meeting contacts, or simply passing through on their way to somewhere else. The air smelled like a mixture of different atmospheres, all carefully balanced by the station's environmental systems. Daniel had barely taken 10 steps before the staring began. A group of tall, blue-skinned merchants stopped their conversation to gawk. A family of small furry creatures pointed and chittered to each other. Even the security droid at the entrance paused its patrol to scan Rascal with its sensors. This was normal. Humans were common enough in the galaxy now, but most traveled alone or with standard companion animals like cats or dogs. Nobody brought a honey badger to a space station. "Is that your pet?" A voice clicked and buzzed from Daniel's right. He turned to see 3 Hiverans standing near a display of exotic goods. They were insectoids, each about 6 feet tall with glossy black exoskeletons and multiple arms. The one who had spoken wore expensive trade medallions across its thorax. "His name is Rascal," Daniel said carefully. The Hiveran made a sound like rattling stones. Laughter. "How delightfully primitive. Tell me, human, does your species still believe that keeping lower creatures makes you seem more important?" The other 2 Hiverans joined in the laughter. One of them pulled out a holoprojector and displayed an image of a sleek crystalline serpent coiled around a decorative stand. "This is a Koresh viper from the 3rd moon of Hivora Prime. It produces bioluminescent displays that can be seen from orbit. Its venom can paralyze a Dravik warrior in seconds." "Very impressive," Daniel said, keeping his voice neutral. "And you bring that?" The first Hiveran gestured at Rascal with one of its lower arms. "What does it do? Roll over, play dead?" Rascal had stopped walking and was now staring at the Hiverans with his characteristic intensity. His body had gone very still. "He's not really a pet," Daniel said, "and I'd appreciate it if you didn't insult him." This brought fresh waves of laughter from the Hiverans and several other species who had gathered to watch the exchange. A Braylon merchant, its amphibious skin glistening under the station lights, joined the conversation. "Humans and their emotional attachments to useless creatures," the Braylon gurgled. "It explains much about your species' psychology." Daniel felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had learned long ago that arguing with people who had already made up their minds was a waste of time. "If you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." He tugged gently on Rascal's leash. The honey badger reluctantly broke his stare and followed, but Daniel could feel the tension in the line. Rascal didn't like being mocked any more than Daniel did. They walked through the concourse toward the docking administration office. Behind them, Daniel could hear the Hiverans still laughing and talking to the gathered crowd. He caught fragments of their conversation. Something about showing everyone what a real companion creature looked like. At the administration desk, a tired-looking Mentari clerk processed Daniel's docking paperwork without comment. The Mentari were professional about everything, which Daniel appreciated. "You're in Bay 47 for the next 3 cycles," the clerk said, sliding a data chip across the counter. "Station regulations require me to note any biological companions."
Species?
"Honey badger." "From Earth." The clerk's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "Classification?" "Mellivera capensis." "Threat assessment?" Daniel hesitated. "I'd rate him as a low threat if left alone." The clerk made a notation on its screen. "Understood. Please ensure your companion remains in secured areas when not accompanied." "Of course." Daniel led Rascal toward the lift that would take them down to the docking level. As they waited, a young alien child approached, its species unfamiliar to Daniel. It had large eyes and soft fur, and it reached out one tiny hand toward Rascal. "Can I pet him?" Daniel knelt down to the child's level. "Probably not a good idea. He's not used to strangers." The child's parent rushed over, scooping up the youngster and shooting Daniel an apologetic look before hurrying away. Daniel sighed. This was going to be a long 3 cycles. The lift doors opened and they stepped inside. As the car descended, Daniel looked down at Rascal, who had finally relaxed slightly. "They have no idea," Daniel muttered. "None of them have any idea what you can do." Rascal made a soft chattering sound and rubbed against Daniel's leg. The doors opened onto the docking level, and they walked toward Bay 47. Daniel's ship waited for them, safe and secure. For now, that was enough. He would handle his business, avoid trouble, and get off the station before anyone discovered just how wrong they were about Earth's most fearless creature. But deep down, Daniel knew that trouble had a way of finding Rascal, no matter how hard they tried to avoid it. Daniel spent the next day meeting with various trade contacts across the crossroads. Each meeting followed the same pattern. He would arrive, present his cargo manifests, negotiate prices, and try to ignore the pointed questions about his unusual companion. "So it's true what they're saying," said a Dravik shipping coordinator, her reptilian features showing amusement. "You really do travel with that Earth creature. His name is Rascal." Daniel kept his voice professional. "I saw the hollows circulating on the station network. Quite the topic of conversation." She tapped her data pad with one clawed finger. "The Hiverans have been very creative with their commentary." Daniel had seen the hollows too. Someone had edited footage of Rascal walking through the concourse, adding ridiculous sound effects and comparison images of fierce predators from various worlds. The message was clear. Humans kept pathetic creatures as companions because they needed to feel superior to something. The hollow had been shared thousands of times across the station's social network. Daniel had even received messages from other humans apologizing for the mockery, but he had ignored them all. Words didn't bother him. He had dealt with far worse than insults during his years hauling cargo across the colonies, but Rascal was a different story. The honey badger didn't understand mockery or social nuance. He understood threats and challenges, and something in the way those Hiverans had looked at him had triggered his defensive instincts. Daniel could see it in the way Rascal paced in the cargo bay, the way his ears twitched at every sound, the way he had tried 3 times to escape his confinement. "I need to get back to my ship," Daniel said, finishing his business with the Dravik coordinator as quickly as possible. "Of course." "Oh, and Daniel?" The Dravik's expression became serious. "Whatever that creature is, keep it secured. Station security has been asking questions. They're concerned about having an unclassified Earth animal aboard. He's secured. No one has anything to worry about." Daniel left the office and headed toward the lift, but his data pad buzzed before he reached it. The screen showed a priority message from station security. They wanted him to report for an interview about Rascal's classification and containment procedures. He swore under his breath. This was exactly what he had hoped to avoid. The more attention Rascal attracted, the more likely someone would do something stupid. The security office was located in the central hub, which meant another walk through the crowded concourse. Daniel moved quickly, keeping his head down and avoiding eye contact. But halfway across the main floor, he spotted the Hiverans again. They had gathered a small crowd near one of the fountain displays. Chitras, the one with all the trade medallions, was holding court and telling what seemed to be a very animated story. His multiple arms gestured wildly as he spoke, and the gathered aliens laughed on cue. Daniel changed direction, hoping to avoid them, but Chitros spotted him. Ah, the human with the ridiculous pet. Chitros's voice carried across the concourse. Tell us, human, does it do any tricks? Can it count? Roll over, perhaps? The crowd turned to look at Daniel. He felt dozens of eyes on him, evaluating, judging. He could keep walking, ignore them, be the bigger person. That would be the smart move. Rascal is perfectly capable, Daniel said, stopping despite his better judgment. He's just not a performer. Not a performer. Chitros rattled with laughter. Then what good is it? A companion should bring honor to its keeper. Your creature brings only embarrassment. One of the other aliens in the crowd, a Braylon with purple skin markings, spoke up. I've been researching Earth animals. Most of them are quite weak compared to proper predators from civilized worlds. It makes sense that humans would choose such creatures. They need companions they can control. Exactly, Chitros said. Humans are soft, so they keep soft pets. The Koresh vipers I showed earlier could kill a dozen of these honey badgers without effort. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to relax. Appearances can be deceiving, can they? Chitros moved closer, his exoskeleton clicking with each step. I think not. I think your creature is exactly what it appears to be. Small, weak, harmless. You should hope you're right about the harmless part, Daniel said quietly. This brought more laughter from the crowd. Chitros turned to his companions and made an elaborate gesture of fear. His body language exaggerated for comic effect. The crowd ate it up. Daniel walked away without another word. There was no point in continuing the conversation. These beings had made up their minds, and nothing he said would change them. Only experience could do that, and Daniel desperately hoped they wouldn't get that experience. He reached the security office and spent an hour answering questions about Rascal's diet, behavior patterns, and Earth classification. The security officer, a bored-looking Mentari, seemed more interested in completing the paperwork than actually understanding the honey badger's nature. So it's non-aggressive unless provoked? The officer asked. That's correct. And you keep it secured in your cargo bay when not accompanied? Yes. Then we have no issues. Just make sure it stays that way. The officer stamped the data pad with official approval. You're cleared to remain on station for your full scheduled time. Daniel left the security office feeling slightly relieved but still uneasy. Something was going to happen. He could feel it in his bones. The same instinct that had kept him alive during the colony wars, and through a dozen close calls in deep space. He returned to Bay 47 as the station's day cycle shifted toward evening. The docking level was quieter now, with most of the merchant traffic settled into their ships or quarters. Daniel's boots echoed on the metal deck as he approached his ship. The cargo bay doors were closed and locked, exactly as he had left them. But through the hull he could hear sounds of destruction. Rascal was tearing something apart in there. Probably the storage containers Daniel had foolishly thought were secure. It's all right, buddy, Daniel said as he keyed open the door. Just one more day and we're out of here. Rascal looked up from the shredded remains of a plastic crate. His face had that innocent expression that honey badgers somehow manage despite being covered in destruction. Daniel couldn't help but smile. Yeah, I know. You hate being locked up. Daniel sat down on the deck and Rascal waddled over, climbing into his lap like a dog. Just stay calm for one more day, please. These aliens don't understand what you are. And I'd really like to keep it that way. Rascal made a soft chittering sound and closed his eyes. Daniel stroked the honey badger's coarse fur and stared at the cargo bay ceiling. One more day. They just had to make it one more day without incident. Outside, somewhere on the station, Chitros and his companions were planning their next entertainment. They had found the humans' docking bay location through public records. All they needed was the right time to pay a visit and record the harmless little creature up close. It would be hilarious. The station's night cycle brought dimmed lighting and reduced activity to the docking levels. Most beings had retired to their ships or quarters, leaving only automated security droids on patrol. The environmental systems hummed quietly, maintaining atmosphere and temperature across the massive structure. Chitros and two of his Hiveran companions moved through the empty corridors with careful steps. They had consumed enough fermented nectar to feel bold, but not enough to be stupid. At least that's what Chitros told himself. This is going to be perfect, he said, his voice a quiet clicking sound. The human is in his quarters on the upper level. I checked the station logs. His companion, a younger Hiveran named Trell, carried the recording equipment. "Are you certain this is wise?" The human seemed quite protective. "Of that pathetic creature? Please." Chitros waved one of his arms dismissively. "We'll record it up close, maybe tap on the cage a bit and leave. 10 minutes at most. The footage will be priceless." The third Hiveran, Shen, had been unusually quiet. The human said appearances can be deceiving. "Humans say many things," Chitros said. "Most of it is posturing. They're a new species trying to seem tougher than they are. It's actually quite sad when you think about it." They reached Bay 47 and Chitros checked the access panel. As a registered merchant with station privileges, he could override basic security locks for safety inspections or emergency situations. The system logged such access, but Chitros wasn't concerned. He would claim he heard distressing sounds from inside and was checking on the welfare of the creature. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the cargo bay was dimly lit by emergency lighting. Containers were stacked along the walls, and the air smelled of standard ship supplies mixed with something else. Something organic and musky. "Where is it?" Trell whispered, his recording device already active. Chitros's multiple eyes scanned the bay. Movement caught his attention near the back, behind a row of containers. Something small and dark shifted in the shadows. "There," Chitros said, pointing. "Activate your light." Trell switched on the recording device's illumination. The beam cut through the darkness and found Rascal. The honey badger stood on top of an overturned container, his white stripe visible against the dark fur of his back. He was perfectly still, watching the three Hiverans with unblinking eyes. His mouth was slightly open, showing strong teeth designed for crushing and tearing. "Look at it," Chitros laughed, the sound echoing in the cargo bay. "So fierce." "I'm terrified." He pulled out an extender arm, a tool normally used for reaching high shelves or manipulating cargo. The mechanical arm extended toward Rascal, its grippers opening and closing in a taunting gesture. Rascal's body language changed instantly. His shoulders tensed. His claws extended. A low growling sound came from his throat, unlike anything the Hiverans had heard before. "It's trying to threaten us," Shen said nervously. "Maybe we should leave." "Nonsense. Watch this." Chitros moved the extender arm closer, intending to tap Rascal on the head. "See? Completely harmless." The extender touched Rascal's nose. What happened next lasted perhaps 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds shattered everything the Hiverans thought they knew about Earth creatures. Rascal exploded into motion. He didn't retreat or cower. He launched himself at the extender arm with a speed that seemed impossible for his body shape. His jaws clamped down on the mechanical device with such force that metal crunched and circuits sparked. Chitros tried to retract the arm, but Rascal came with it, hanging on with absolute determination. When the honey badger's body swung close enough to the Hiveran, Rascal released the arm and went for Chitros directly. He latched onto Chitros's lower thorax segment, his teeth punching through the exoskeleton like it was cheap plastic. The Hiveran's scream was high-pitched and terrified, nothing like the confident clicking voice from earlier. Rascal shook his head violently, the way a dog might shake a toy. Except this was no toy, and the damage was catastrophic. Chitros flailed with all his arms, trying to dislodge the creature, but Rascal's loose skin made him impossible to grab effectively. Every time Chitros got a grip, the honey badger simply twisted inside his own skin and continued the attack. Trell tried to help, reaching toward Rascal with his own arms. This proved to be a terrible mistake. Rascal released Chitros and immediately pivoted to the new threat. He climbed up Trell's body with his long claws, finding purchase in the joints between exoskeleton plates and causing immediate damage. The Hiveran stumbled backward, crashing into a container. Rascal rode him down, his teeth finding the vulnerable joint where Trell's head segment met his thorax. The recording device fell to the deck, its lens cracking on impact but still capturing footage. Shen was already running. His survival instinct had overridden any sense of loyalty or curiosity. He hit the emergency alarm as he fled into the corridor, his terrified clicking echoing off the walls. Rascal pursued the injured Hiverans as they scrambled toward the exit. Chitros was leaking green blood from multiple wounds, his exoskeleton cracked in several places. Trell had lost function in 2 of his arms and could barely see through the damage to his head segment. They made it through the cargo bay door and into the corridor, but Rascal was right behind them. The honey badger's fury hadn't diminished at all. If anything, the taste of battle had made him more aggressive. The emergency alarm brought security droids converging on the location, but the Hiverans didn't wait. They fled toward the nearest lift, leaving a trail of green blood and broken exoskeleton pieces behind them. Rascal chased them for another 50 meters before stopping at the entrance to a public area. Several aliens who had been passing through scattered in panic, some of them screaming in languages Daniel wouldn't have recognized. The honey badger stood in the middle of the corridor, his chest heaving, his face covered in green blood. His eyes scanned for more threats, finding none that seemed worth pursuing. Slowly he turned and walked back toward Bay 47, as calm as if he had just finished a light snack. Behind him, station alarms continued to wail. Security droids arrived at the scene to find terrified witnesses, blood trails, and pieces of exoskeleton scattered across the deck. The recording device lay in the cargo bay, still running. Its cracked lens had captured everything. Within hours, the footage would spread across the station's network, replacing the mocking hollows with something far more terrifying. The human's pet wasn't harmless at all. It was a nightmare wrapped in fur, and the Crossroads station was about to learn exactly what Earth meant when it classified something as a predator. Rascal settled back onto his container in the cargo bay, licking his paws clean. He had defended his territory. He had won, and somewhere in his small but fierce brain he was perfectly satisfied with the outcome. The night cycle continued, but sleep would be difficult for many beings aboard the Crossroads tonight. Security Chief Grawl arrived at the medical center within minutes of the first alarm. The Dravik officer was a veteran of 3 colonial conflicts and had seen plenty of violence in her career, but the state of the 3 Hiverans shocked even her hardened sensibilities. Chitros lay on a medical bed while 2 doctors worked to stabilize his injuries. His exoskeleton had been cracked in 7 places, including a massive wound on his lower thorax where something had bitten completely through the armor. Green blood covered most of his body, and several of his arms hung at wrong angles. Trell was in worse condition. The medical team had sedated him completely because his pain responses were overwhelming the station's neural dampeners. The damage to his head segment alone would require reconstructive surgery. Shen was the only one capable of speaking, though his voice clicked and stuttered with residual fear. It came out of nowhere, Shen said, his multiple eyes wide. We were just recording, and it attacked like a demon. Nothing should move that fast. Nothing that small should be that strong. Grawl's datapad showed the preliminary security footage. She had watched it 3 times, and each viewing made her more concerned. The creature moved with practiced efficiency, targeting weak points with precision that spoke of evolutionary perfection. It didn't fight like prey. It fought like an apex predator that had forgotten it was small. You entered the human's cargo bay without authorization, Grawl said, her voice flat. We had merchant access privileges, Shen protested weakly, for emergency situations. Was this an emergency? Shen said nothing. Grawl's communicator buzzed. Chief, we have a situation in Sector 7. The creature has escaped the cargo bay. Her blood went cold. Repeat that. The honey badger is loose in the station. We have multiple sightings near the commercial district. It appears to be tracking something. Grawl pulled up a station map on her datapad. Sector 7 was 3 levels away from the medical center. The creature was hunting the Hiverans. Initiate lockdown protocols for Sectors 6 through 9, she ordered. Contain it before it reaches civilian areas. Chief, it's already in civilian areas. We have reports of beings fleeing from restaurants and shops. The creature went through a ventilation shaft and emerged in the food court. Grawl swore in her native tongue. She opened station-wide communications. All personnel, we have a hostile creature loose on levels 4 and 5. Species: Earth honey badger. Do not attempt to engage. Repeat, do not engage. Maintain distance and report sightings to security immediately. She looked at Shen. Where is the human? I don't know. His quarters, maybe? Grawl pulled up Daniel's location through his station ID chip. He was indeed in his assigned quarters on level 8, completely unaware of what was happening. She sent him a priority summons. Then she grabbed her equipment and headed for the lift. If this creature was as dangerous as the footage suggested, they needed every advantage they could get. 2 levels down, Rascal moved through the station like he owned it. The honey badger had caught the scent of the Hiverans and was following it with single-minded determination. His injuries from the fight were minor, just a few scratches on his thick skin. The Hiverans had injured themselves more than they had hurt him. He squeezed through a narrow maintenance passage and emerged in a shopping area. Dozens of aliens scattered at the sight of him, knocking over displays and each other in their panic. Rascal barely noticed them. He was focused on the scent trail. A security droid rolled into his path, its multiple arms extending stun batons. "Remain still," the droid said in standard galactic common. "You are in violation of station regulations," Rascal charged. The droid's programming wasn't designed for something that fought back against pain compliance tools. The stun batons made contact with Rascal's body, delivering enough electricity to drop most creatures twice his size. Rascal stumbled, shook himself, and kept coming. He climbed the droid's frame, his claws finding purchase on the smooth metal. His teeth tore into the sensor array mounted where a head would be. Sparks flew and the droid's movements became erratic as it lost primary visual input. Rascal jumped clear as the droid crashed into a wall. He continued down the corridor, leaving the sparking machine behind. More security droids converged on his location, but the results were the same. Rascal fought through pain, ignored deterrence, and destroyed anything that tried to stop him. His thick skin and loose hide made him nearly impossible to grab or restrain. Energy nets designed to catch criminals were shredded by his claws before they could fully deploy. The station's residents watched in horror through windows and from safe distances. Videos started appearing on the social network within minutes. The mocking hollows from earlier were replaced with footage of Rascal tearing through security measures like they didn't exist. One video showed him fighting 3 droids at once, climbing from one to another and disabling each with terrifying efficiency. Another showed him squeezing through a gap that looked too small for his body, his loose skin allowing him to compress in ways that seemed impossible. The comments changed rapidly. "What kind of creature is this? Earth must be a nightmare world. The human tried to warn us. How do we stop it?" Daniel arrived at the security center to find chaos. Displays showed Rascal's progress through the station, along with damage reports and injury counts. Grawl turned to face him, her reptilian features set in grim lines. "Your creature has injured 3 beings and destroyed substantial property," she said. "It's currently heading toward the medical center, presumably tracking the Hiverans who provoked it." "They went into my cargo bay?" Daniel's voice was quiet. "Yes. Without authorization." Grawl showed him the footage from Trell's recording device. Daniel watched in silence. When it ended, he looked at Grawl with steady eyes. "I warned everyone. Multiple times. That may be, but right now we need to contain the situation before someone gets killed."
"Can you call it off?"
Daniel considered. "Maybe. But I need to get close to him and your droids need to stand down. Rascal won't stop fighting as long as he perceives threats. The medical center is full of injured and vulnerable beings. We can't let it reach them." "Then let me get to him first." Daniel pulled up a station map. "He's following the Hiveran's scent. I can intercept him near the junction at level 5 if I move now." Grawl studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Go, but Daniel, if you can't stop it, I will have to authorize lethal force." "You can try," Daniel said, already moving toward the door. "But I've seen what Rascal can survive. Lethal force might just make him angrier." He left before Grawl could respond. Behind him, the security chief pulled up Earth's biological database and started reading about honey badgers with growing dread. Everything she read made the situation worse. Thick skin resistant to arrows and machetes, immunity to many venoms, documented cases of fighting off lions and surviving leopard attacks, intelligence capable of using tools and solving complex problems, and most concerning of all, a complete absence of fear or self-preservation instinct when defending territory or protecting themselves. The human hadn't been exaggerating. If anything, he had understated the danger. Grawl watched the security feeds as Daniel ran through the corridors toward an intercept point. On another feed, Rascal was getting closer to the medical center, leaving a trail of disabled droids and terrified witnesses in his wake. This was going to end badly for someone. Grawl just hoped it wouldn't be the entire station. Daniel ran through the corridors faster than he had moved in years. His breath came hard and his legs burned, but he pushed himself harder. He had to reach Rascal before this situation spiraled completely out of control. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of panic. Alarms blared. Announcement systems urged everyone to stay in their quarters or shops. The entire station was on high alert because of one small animal that most beings had mocked just hours ago. He reached the junction point and skidded to a stop, pulling out the container he had brought from his ship. Inside was a piece of honeycomb mixed with mealworms, Rascal's favorite treat. Daniel had been saving it for emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. He heard Rascal before he saw him. The honey badger's claws clicked on the metal deck plating, accompanied by heavy breathing. A security droid lay sparking in the corridor behind him, its arms torn off and its sensor array destroyed. Rascal rounded the corner and stopped when he saw Daniel. The honey badger was covered in green blood from the Hiverans, with additional stains that might have been hydraulic fluid from the droids. His eyes were wild with adrenaline and aggression. For a moment, Daniel thought it might be too late. Rascal was too far into his defensive mode, too amped up on the fight to recognize friend from foe. Then Daniel opened the container, and the smell of honeycomb filled the air. Rascal's posture changed. The aggressive stance relaxed slightly. His nose twitched as he processed the familiar scent. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly, kneeling down to Rascal's level. "I know you're mad. I know they came into your space and threatened you. But it's over now. You won." Rascal took a cautious step forward, then another. His eyes never left Daniel's face, searching for something, trust maybe, or understanding. Daniel held out a piece of honeycomb. "Come on, let's go home." The honey badger closed the distance between them and accepted the food. As he chewed, Daniel gently scratched behind his ears, feeling the tension slowly drain from Rascal's body. The transformation was remarkable. The terrifying predator that had torn through station security became a tired animal, looking for comfort from the one being he trusted. Daniel picked up Rascal, who curled into his arms without resistance. The honey badger made soft chittering sounds, completely at ease now that he was with his human. A group of security droids appeared at the end of the corridor, weapons ready. Daniel held up one hand. "Stand down." "He's calm." The droids hesitated, their programming struggling with the contradiction of the peaceful scene before them versus the destruction this creature had caused. Finally, they lowered their weapons and maintained distance. Graal's voice came through a nearby speaker. "Daniel, bring it to the security center. We need to discuss what happens next." Understood. The walk through the station was surreal. Aliens peered out from shops and doorways, watching Daniel carry Rascal like he was any normal pet. Some looked confused. Others looked terrified. A few looked thoughtful, as if they were reassessing everything they thought they knew about Earth and its creatures. Professor Aldrin met them halfway to the security center. The Mentari xenobiologist had her data pad out and was taking readings from a safe distance. "Fascinating," she said, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "The aggression response is completely tied to threat perception. Remove the threat and the behavior normalizes immediately." "He's not a monster," Daniel said. "He's just an animal defending himself." "Oh, I agree completely. But Daniel, do you understand what this means?" Professor Aldrin moved alongside them, still taking readings. "Earth creatures operate on threat assessment models that are completely different from most galactic species. Most civilized worlds bred aggression out of their companion animals over thousands of years. But this honey badger has retained all its natural defensive capabilities. Earth animals haven't been domesticated as long as animals from other worlds," Daniel said, "and honey badgers specifically have never been fully domesticated. Rascal tolerates me because I saved him and respect his nature, but he's still wild at his core." They reached the security center where Graal waited with several other officials. The station commander, a tall being from a species Daniel didn't recognize, looked at Rascal with undisguised concern. "That creature caused severe injuries to 3 beings and destroyed significant station property," the commander said, "after they illegally entered my ship and provoked him," Daniel replied calmly. "The security footage will show that." Graal nodded. "It does. The Hiverans used their merchant credentials inappropriately. They bypassed security protocols and entered a secured area without authorization." Professor Aldrin stepped forward. "If I may, Commander, I've been reviewing Earth's biological databases. The honey badger is classified as one of the most fearless animals on the planet. They're known for fighting off predators many times their size. Their thick skin provides natural armor against bites and stings. They possess remarkable intelligence and problem-solving abilities." She pulled up images on her data pad, Here's footage from Earth showing a honey badger escaping from a high-security enclosure by using tools. Here's another fighting off 6 lions to protect a meal, and this one shows a honey badger surviving cobra, venom that would kill most creatures. The assembled officials looked at the images with growing understanding and concern. Earth is classified as a Class 7 death world, Professor Aldrin continued. We knew humans came from a harsh environment, but I don't think we fully appreciated what that means. Even their mid-level predators possess capabilities that would make them apex predators on most civilized worlds. The commander turned to Daniel. Why didn't you warn us more clearly? I did warn you. Multiple times. But nobody listened. Daniel stroked Rascal's fur. Everyone assumed they knew better. They looked at him and saw something small and harmless. They didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, Earth creatures play by different rules. Silence filled the security center as the implications sank in. If a honey badger could cause this much chaos, what about the other creatures humans kept as companions? What about the creatures humans considered dangerous? What do we do now? The commander asked. Professor Aldrin spoke up again. We learn. We document. We update our protocols for Earth fauna, and most importantly, we stop assuming that size equals threat level. She looked at Rascal with something approaching respect. This creature just taught the entire station a valuable lesson about making assumptions. The question is whether we're intelligent enough to learn from it. Grawl pulled up a report on her datapad. The Hiverans are demanding the creature be destroyed and the human punished. What does the law say? Daniel asked. The law says they entered your secured space without authorization and provoked your companion. The law also says you're responsible for securing potentially dangerous animals. Grawl's expression was neutral. It's complicated. No, Daniel said firmly. It's actually simple. They broke multiple regulations. Rascal defended his territory. That's what animals do when threatened. Punishing him for having natural defensive instincts would be like punishing fire for being hot. The commander considered this for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. But Daniel, you cannot stay on this station. Not after what happened. It would cause too much tension. That's fine. I have cargo to deliver anyway. We'll leave as soon as my ship is ready. One condition, the commander said. Professor Aldrin will conduct a full biological assessment of your companion and submit it to the Galactic Biological Database. Earth creatures need proper classification to prevent future incidents. Daniel looked at the professor, who nodded eagerly. I'll be gentle and thorough. The galaxy needs to understand what Earth is, what it produces, and what that means for our interactions with humans and their world. All right, Daniel agreed. Rascal had fallen asleep in Daniel's arms, exhausted from the fight and the adrenaline crash. He looked peaceful now, just a small animal seeking comfort from his human. The beings in the security center looked at him with new eyes. Not with mockery, but with understanding and a healthy dose of caution. Earth had just announced itself to the galaxy in a way that words never could. Through the actions of one small, fearless creature, the entire station had learned what it meant to come from a death world. And across the station's network, the mocking hollows had been replaced with educational content, warning messages, and a new respect for the planet called Earth and everything that lived there. The formal hearing took place the next day in the station's judicial chamber. Daniel sat at one table with Rascal secured in a reinforced carrier beside him. The honey badger seemed content, occasionally making soft sounds and accepting treats through the carrier's feeding slot. Across the room, Chitros and his companions sat with their legal representative. All 3 Hiverans were heavily bandaged, their exoskeletons repaired with temporary polymer patches. Chitros could barely move 2 of his arms, and Trell's head segment was wrapped in medical gauze. The station magistrate, an elderly being from a species known for fairness and wisdom, reviewed the evidence on her datapad. She had spent hours going through security footage, witness statements, and biological reports. This is an unusual case, the magistrate said, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation system. We have clear violations on both sides. The question is determining responsibility and appropriate consequences. Chitros's representative stood. The Hiverans acknowledged they entered the secured area inappropriately. However, they could not have anticipated such a violent response from a creature that appeared harmless. The human failed to adequately warn of the danger his animal posed. Daniel's appointed advocate, a sharp-minded being from the Mentari species, responded immediately. The human issued multiple warnings, both verbal and in his security documentation. The phrase low threat if left alone clearly implies danger if provoked. Furthermore, the Hiverans deliberately sought out the creature for mockery and entertainment. The magistrate held up one hand for silence. I have reviewed the social network posts. The Hiverans created and distributed content specifically mocking the human's companion. This establishes intent to engage with the creature. She pulled up security footage on the chamber's main display. The recording device captured everything. The Hiverans entered the cargo bay. The creature initially did not attack. Only when physical contact was made with an extender arm did the honey badger respond with force. Chitros tried to speak, but his clicking voice was weak. We thought it was harmless. We didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense when you ignore warnings, the magistrate said. However, Daniel Reed, you also bear responsibility. Your companion caused extensive damage and created a panic situation that endangered station residents. Professor Aldrin stood from the observer section. Magistrate, if I may? Professor Aldrin, you're not a party to this case. No, but I have relevant information. My biological assessment is complete. She approached the bench with her data pad. The honey badger is now properly classified in the Galactic Biological Database as a Class 4 defensive predator. This classification is typically reserved for creatures that pose minimal threat unless provoked, but extreme threat when defending territory or themselves. She pulled up comparative data. I've also completed a preliminary assessment of Earth's ecosystem. The planet has over 5,000 species that would qualify as Class 3 or higher predators. The honey badger is actually mid-range for Earth's dangerous fauna. The chamber fell silent as beings processed this information. Finally, the magistrate spoke. Are you saying Earth has thousands of creatures this dangerous? More dangerous, actually. The honey badger is small and primarily defensive. Earth also has creatures like polar bears, saltwater crocodiles, and great white sharks. Each of these would be classified as Class 5 or 6 predators. Professor Aldrin's expression was serious. Earth is a death world in the truest sense. Its inhabitants, human and animal alike, evolved under extreme competitive pressure. She turned to address the full chamber. This incident should serve as a wake-up call. We cannot judge Earth creatures by the standards of civilized world fauna. They operate under completely different evolutionary rules. The magistrate considered this for a long moment. Very well. Here is my judgment. The Hiverans are guilty of unauthorized entry, harassment, and provocation. They will pay all medical costs, repair damages to the human's cargo bay, and are banned from the Crossroads station for 6 standard cycles. Chitros started to protest, but the magistrate's expression stopped him. Daniel Reed, you are cleared of criminal charges. However, new regulations will be implemented regarding Earth fauna on this station. All creatures from Earth must be registered with full biological data. Warning markers must be displayed on any ship or quarters housing Earth animals. This will be known as the Rascal Protocol. Daniel nodded. That's fair. Additionally, the magistrate continued, Professor Aldrin will compile educational materials about Earth creatures for distribution across the galactic network. Ignorance has proven dangerous. Knowledge may prevent future incidents. The hearing concluded and Daniel gathered his things. Several beings approached him as he prepared to leave, including the Braylon merchant who had mocked him earlier. Human Daniel, the Braylon said, its voice subdued. I owe you an apology. We were foolish and arrogant. Apology accepted, Daniel said. Just remember this next time you meet someone from Earth. We're not trying to seem tough. We're just being honest about where we come from. Over the next few hours, Daniel completed his cargo transactions. The difference in how beings treated him was remarkable. Instead of dismissive glances, he received respectful nods. Instead of mockery, he received genuine interest and questions about Earth. One young alien approached nervously. Is it true that Earth has creatures even more dangerous than your companion? Much more dangerous, Daniel confirmed. But most of them don't bother humans unless we bother them first. That's the key lesson here. Respect other beings and their space, and usually they'll respect yours. The shipping contracts Daniel secured were better than anything he had expected. Word had spread that the human could command the loyalty of a creature that had torn through station security. If his companion trusted him, then he must be trustworthy and capable. Daniel returned to his ship where Professor Aldrin was finishing her examination of Rascal. The honey badger was cooperative, accepting her gentle handling and non-invasive scans. "He's remarkable," she said, reviewing the data. "Perfect adaptation to his environment. Thick skin, powerful jaws, intelligence, fearlessness. Evolution created a nearly perfect defensive package in a compact form. He's also loyal and affectionate with people he trusts," Daniel added. "That's what most beings don't see. Rascal isn't just a fighting machine. He's capable of forming bonds." Professor Aldrin nodded thoughtfully. "That's very human of him. Perhaps that's why you chose each other." After she left, Daniel settled into his pilot chair. Rascal climbed into the co-pilot seat and curled up, ready for departure. The honey badger's eyes were already closing, exhausted from 2 days of chaos. "We did it, buddy," Daniel said softly. "We survived the crossroads and changed some minds along the way." Rascal made a sleepy, chittering sound. The ship undocked smoothly, pulling away from the station and orienting toward their next destination. As they prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Daniel's communication system chimed with new messages. Job offers, research requests, questions about Earth and its creatures. One message caught his attention. It was from the station commander. "Your companion has changed how we view Earth and humans. The Rascal Protocol will be implemented across the sector. Thank you for the education, even if it came at a cost. Safe travels, Daniel Reed." Daniel smiled and filed the message. Then he pulled up the navigation charts and selected their next stop, a research station near the outer rim. It would be a quiet run, or at least he hoped so. Rascal stretched in his seat, completely content. The honey badger had no concept of the changes he had caused or the lessons he had taught. He only knew that he had defended his territory, protected his human, and could now rest peacefully. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the crossroads behind, the station's social network continued to buzz with activity. The mocking hollows were gone, replaced with educational posts about Earth creatures. Images of polar bears, tigers, venomous snakes, and crocodiles circulated with detailed warnings. A new phrase entered galactic common vocabulary: "Don't mess with Earth creatures." It was simple advice, but it carried the weight of hard-learned wisdom. Chitras recovered in the medical center, watching the social network activity with shame and pain. He had learned his lesson, though it had cost him dearly. The scars on his exoskeleton would fade eventually, but the memory of Rascal's fury would stay with him forever. Across the galaxy, other stations and ships received updated biological databases. The Earth classification changed from interesting but harmless to proceed with extreme caution. Humans were no longer seen as soft beings with soft pets. They were survivors from a harsh world, accompanied by creatures that shared that harsh evolution. And somewhere in hyperspace, Daniel Reed and his honey badger companion slept peacefully, unaware that they had just rewritten humanity's reputation across a dozen sectors. Rascal dreamed of honeycomb and mealworms, completely satisfied with his life. He had a warm place to sleep, food to eat, and a human who understood him. By honey badger standards, life was perfect. The universe had learned an important lesson. Never judge a book by its cover. Never mock what you don't understand. And definitely never provoke a creature from Earth, because on Earth, even the small creatures were born to survive.